The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Reynardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the lizard died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only Master War was a short one. Touché, he said, and died. Reynardo told the corpses. It was something he'd seen in a play once. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How is it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Okay, let's make this quick. I'm on my break in literally 2 minutes. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? He was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. Rather well, actually. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Reynardo had never been much of a student. At Sword Fu school, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Skyripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists, right? Reynardo actually could think of a few things that were worse, but he would make sure they didn't happen this time, right? Exactly. As he set out down the path, Reynardo wondered why the parts of the Sky River had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. And, hopefully this time, just his destruction. Tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. It made strange, mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum. The Sky Ripper was following his every step. At least it acknowledged him as the master. But there was no trigger. How was he supposed to fire it? Fire, he said. Nothing happened. Well, maybe it just needed to warm up. After all, it hadn't been fired in thousands of years. The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Reynardo had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out. "Reynardo!" It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia. "Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world." "Yeah, sure it will," cracked Reynardo. "Pull the other one." "If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras. He'll tell you the same thing." Oh, she would say that. That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating. Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it. Zenobia was so frustrating. If she couldn't get you with magic, she'd get you with reason and caution and sensible arguments. Of course, Calaveras, he might not know the latest scientific theories with evidence and all, but Reynardo preferred the knowledge in the old books anyway. What they said felt true, and that's what's important. You should be careful. Reynardo landed on the island, expecting Zenobia's ambush at any moment. On the other hand, there did seem to be a lot of ravens around here. Were they just lost patrols stirring up trouble? Were they looking for him? If she was going to ambush him, wouldn't she keep the road clear so he wouldn't be on his guard? Unless they were part of the ambush, the obvious ravens he was meant to see to take his mind off the ones he wouldn't see. After all these years, she's still fucking crazy. No skateboarding, the sign said. Zenobia's ambush never materialized. Could she be sincere? Calaveras was a great scholar. Reynardo doubted even Zenobia could convince him to say something he didn't believe. And if he was working for the Empire, he'd never have told Reynardo about the Skyripper in the first place. He would listen to the wise old toad, but that didn't mean he had to agree.
Why? Why did he listen to Zenobia? She was the enemy. Of course she didn't want him to use his shiny new weapon. The thing was, though, she was appallingly honest. She wouldn't lie even to an enemy. At least she'd never lied to him. So if she said he had to see Calaveras, it probably was a good idea to see him. Ugh, it was infuriating.
Calaveras examined the Skyripper eagerly. Oh, how often does a new relic surface? He brushed off Zenobia's warning. Oh, what do sorceresses know about physics? However, he did know a few ways to make the weapon even more precise and more powerful, and quickly went off to tinker. Soon the Skyripper no longer whined, but thrummed like a hummingbird taking off. It was ready for war.
And so, Reynardo thanked Calaveras and took the legendary weapon to the final battle. But where were the other rebel ships? Had something happened?
He could defeat the Imperial fleet with a Skyripper, but he couldn't govern. He was not cut out to be Emperor, and he'd no desire to be one. There were a few rebel ships here and there, but there was no organization to the battle. Where was the Council flagship? Something had gone terribly wrong.
But he had the Skyripper, and the Ravens had nowhere they could hide. port that led right into the middle of the fleet.
Shall we dance?
Good, the lead raven.
Speaker was on the deck, bleeding. Why was she even here? They found our base, she croaked. The council, all dead. We must surrender. No, we could still win this, said Reynardo. I have the Sky Ripper. He would be a real hero and save the day, even when all appeared to be lost. You're a good boy, said the speaker, and then she died.
What did you do if one of these platforms stalled?
Fired at the Sky Ripper. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. And for good measure, he played the beam around it, setting all the other nearby Imperial ships on fire too. And he watched them burn.
See? He could use the Sky Ripper safely.
The few remaining rebels gave a cheer. And then they stopped cheering. There was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger. Crates were falling off ship decks, upwards into the hole. And the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror as it poured into the ravenous hole. He guessed that somewhere behind that ever-widening hole were gods that had long been exiled. But it didn't really matter. Time was done for here, and soon it was. He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome.